All right, let's get into it. So, Andy, I'll give you the intro as well as to all of my tens of subscribers on YouTube that I have right now. So, I wanted to do kind of like a business, like success podcast, but instead of the typical just interview, freestyle session, instead of the typical just interview, life story, talk about positive thought, blah, blah, blah. I just kind of I have like some specific topics I want to cover with everybody. So,
yeah. Well, ask away. You tell me what you want to talk about. We'll talk about.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm calling it the Breakthrough Podcast. I wanted to call it Level Up, but there's like 10 podcasts like that already. So
hopefully yours will be a legitimate level up, unlike all the other bullshit.
Well, yeah, they had like a couple hundred subscribers, but we'll surpass them soon. It's all good. It's the content, not the name. Are you familiar with the talent code?
Yeah, I did read it. I remember JJ Watt was talking about it. Yeah. I read it. Was a long time ago that I read it, probably, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years. The main takeaway from what I remember was you got to really focus, and your ability to focus is like everything.
I forget what it's called, but like there comes a point where there's a breaking point where you're doing something and you're struggling through it. And like, that's always the hardest part. Like you're like 90% there.
Yes.
And then there's always a struggle, like to finally get it. Like if you think about riding a bike, or for me, it's like playing piano, but you understand that point, right?
I've experienced that on multiple occasions, primarily with business, but
beautiful. So that's the topic of the podcast, the breakthrough, right? Cool. And in that book,
I could tell you 4 really good stories about that.
Perfect. In that book, they like scientifically prove it that like once you do that, it literally like changes your cells. Like, wow. There's a thing.
I need to go and reread it.
I mean, I don't even know if I finished the book. Just that main point was enough to like be a game changer for me. Because when I was doing the recording studio, so I was going through that like every single day, like trying to get a mix right, or like trying to learn the piano and get the chords right. So it really just stuck out to me. So before we get into the stories, which I love the fact that that already like kind of sparked some things for you, let's give the people a little bit of an intro on you. Tell the people what you do, who you are, a little bit about your background, as much as we can say.
Yeah, I mean, you could probably do it better than me, just depending on what you want to say. But yeah, pretty much what I do right now. So I'm no longer young. So I basically do real estate full time. I'm very active. So I get my fingers dirty. I'm not a limited partner cutting checks that, for money that's not mine. So what I primarily do at this point is I like to lend money, and I like to lend money out because it's easier, deal with less headache, so on and so forth. So yeah, I'll make loans. I'll make short-term loans. Typically I'll get like a piece of the action on the deal. So I like to do that. That's a small percentage of what I do. And then the bulk of what I do, probably 60 to 70%, is I buy stuff. I buy real estate, fix it up a little bit, and then I finance it to people. And yeah, so that's probably the first portion's probably 10%, 15%. The next portion's like 60 or 70. And then the last portion is I will buy larger buildings if I can find them. They're very hard to find. But I like to find them in kind of like tier 3 markets where we don't have a lot of competition. And usually there's a lot of stuff that we have to do to them. So the terminology would be like value add. So you go and you have to fix them up. So we'll have to put a lot of money into them and just get them stabilized. And yeah, ideally we refinance out, our money. So those would be really the main things that I do. And then periodically, yes, I will buy some stuff that I just rent out to hold on to. So those are really the main things that I do. That's where I focus almost all my time, but obviously I've got some other interests as well. Brandon, you could talk about that if you want to.
Yeah, perfect. That's a good segue as to why I wanted to have you on, right? So we have our little consulting biz. It's real estate related. That's kind of how I met Andy, was via real estate. Was doing wholesaling like, and it's like 5 or 6 years ago at this point, I think. time
Yeah,
time
goes by real fast.
Yep. So he had a really cool business, was looking for someone that kind of had like the skills that I had to blow it out of the water with digital marketing. And that's exactly what we've done. So, that's one of your side hustles, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And so let's just to kind of give the people, why I consider Andy a mentor as well as a business partner and friend, fellow world conqueror. So just that little side hustle is does $1 million in revenue per year, little over that, and climbing, right? So, and
Yeah.
everybody does real estate, right? Get rough estimate, like how many doors do you have roughly, and maybe break.
Yeah. I mean, it's probably, to be honest with you, I really don't. A lot of people want to brag about this stuff, and it's, oh, I got this much real estate or this many doors. For me, the only thing I give a shit about, frankly, is how much money I got coming in every month, and or the possibility of money coming in every month. And the reason I say possibility is because, like, right now I'm driving up to go look at a deal, and I mean, I don't know if I'll buy it or not. Hopefully I will, and that'll bring me. It's not much, but it'll bring me an extra $500 a month. And so these, I like to just stack EBITDAs, basically cash flows. And so,
As far as those little rentals, are we talking tens or hundreds?
oh yeah, no, multiple hundreds. Yeah.
Just to give people an idea out there of what we're dealing with. I cut them off a little
And
bit.
also, if I can comment, and I'm not tooting my horn, but what you will see, I used to go to those conferences because I had to learn something. So I would go to some of these conferences, and you'd hear people bragging about, oh, I got 500 doors, I got 200 doors, I got 1,000 doors, or whatever bullshit, excuse my language, was coming out of their mouth. But I have an inquisitive mind, so I want to know, well, what percentage do you own? And so I would ask, okay, well, tell me a little bit more about that, or like, what percent do you own? I think that's a very valid question, and most people can't even answer it because there's so many partners. It's like you got so many cooks in the kitchen. It doesn't matter if you got a full buffet in there, you're not going to get even a bite to eat of the cake. So for me, most of my stuff is 100% owned, and then on everything else, I've got like 2 partners, and that's it. So that's kind of how I like to do things.
Yeah, so I just want to give people an idea of like the level that you're playing at, right? And
Yeah,
then,
and again, there's always a bigger gunslinger around the block. I mean, you got your Blackstone guys, and there's plenty of guys, way wealthier than, and smarter and everything else. But I'm very pleased with how my life has turned out. We'll put it that way.
so he's legit, folks. I mean, just the past couple of deals I've seen him done were large apartment complexes, hotel conversions, and a big old trailer park that's gonna cash flow more than most of you guys will ever make. So awesome. And yeah, it's again, just to establish some cred, just so we know you're not some random guy driving with the sunglasses, right?
Yeah.
All right, let's get into it. First, I want to talk about the upbringing a little bit. So when you were younger, like say your formative years, like adolescent, 12 to 18, something like that. Did you ever have like a thing? What was your thing during that period?
I knew that I wanted to be wealthy. I knew that I wanted the freedom and I wanted the wealth. I knew that from the time I was a little kid. I remember having, turkey dinners on Thanksgiving, and my grandparents, they're asking, well, what do you want to be when you grow up and that sort of stuff. And I didn't want to be anything. I just wanted to be rich. And I remember telling them, I don't necessarily know why, but I mean, I was probably saying that when I was 8 or 9 years old. I don't know if I really got much encouragement from my parents, but they definitely didn't slow me down. But I would go out and I'd pass out flyers in the neighborhood, wash cars. I was doing that, when I was a little kid. I would get on my bike and knock on people's doors, wash cars for 8, 9, $10 a car. And I thought that that was pretty cool because it provided me with a sense of freedom, because then I had my own money. I could go. We used to call it the liquor store. There was a liquor store down the street. I had my own money to do that with, because the rest of the time, the arcade or whatever, I'd have to ask my parents, and they wouldn't get my dad. They're just very parsimonious. He wouldn't give me any money, which was good. So I think that those were formative times without question. And then that blossomed off into other stuff where I started doing landscape work and things along those lines.
When did you start doing landscaping?
I was probably 13, 14 years old. And I would just go to people's houses and chop wood, clean up their yard, pick weeds, stuff like that. And then one summer I got hired by a guy named Walter. No, I got hired by a guy named Mr. Foster to work at his house and, washing windows and all sorts of stuff like that. And the main contractor that was at his house doing the work, his name was Walter. And Walter was probably my age now, 40, 35 to 45, something like that. And I was a young kid. And yeah, and so then I started working for him. And then next summer I worked for him full time. So that's what I did. And then from there, I think I worked at a warehouse. I worked at a warehouse with some like gangster named Frank that I became friends with. I can't believe it. And that guy used to come over and pick me up on the way to work. I mean, looking back on it, I can't even believe that my mom allowed me to go drive with this guy. But she did. I mean, he was like he was like a Mexican gangster. And yeah, so I worked at a warehouse, like, just moving stuff on forklifts and things like that. I wasn't driving the forklifts, but I would pick up stuff and load it. So I think I always had a good work ethic. I wanted to work hard, but that was like an hourly rate job, and I was like, I don't really like this.
At what age was that?
I was probably I couldn't drive yet, so I was probably 15.
So at 15, you realized the hourly grind was not for you.
Yeah, I didn't like that. And then I think the following summer, I took a job selling cutlery, selling Cutco knives. And I remember my parents didn't want me to do it, but there was an ad in the paper, and they were like, "Oh, we'll pay $10 an hour," which is more of a recruiting thing. And they do pay, $10 an hour or whatever, or $9. I don't remember what it was back then, 7, 8, $9 an hour for your first couple appointments. And then after that, if you don't sell, they just get rid of you. So I did that, and that was when I got into sales, and that was fantastic. That was a game changer for me. That completely altered the course of my life.
Beautiful. My next question, you kind of already answered it. So you were kind of always driven and kind of had that positive mindset that's kind of required to be successful, it seems like.
I think it is, because if you think about it, I mean, no negative-minded people have ever really made a lot of money. I mean, the world is going to reward optimism. It just does. I mean, if you're not optimistic, I mean, how are you going to make money? So if you think about it holistically, if you are negative minded about the macro level economy and you short the United States, okay, that's fine. You're negative minded about the macro level economy, but you're an optimist in your conviction. You have the courage of your convictions to say, you know what, I'm not a trader, but to place a short bet on the United States or whatever. There's obviously some nuance there, but I do think all in all, you've got to be positive minded.
Beautiful. Yeah. So I don't know. I remember there was a specific, I remember the specific time when kind of like my mindset changed, but it doesn't seem like you really had like a catalyst like that. It was just kind of, maybe you figured it out too young to even remember it. But
The other thing is this, I vividly also remember, I mean, I think all of this stuff in life, whether it's working out, whether it's whatever it is, I mean, you got to spend your time in the woods. There has to be something where you hit a low point in some capacity. And I do remember feeling pretty insignificant for whatever reason from a financial standpoint. And I knew, look, there's only a few areas where I was going to be able to compete, right? I mean, I'm not 6'3", I'm not 210 pounds, I'm not solid muscle. Okay, so throw the throw the athletic stuff out the water. Also, nowadays it's funny because you got people talking about their sexuality and all that riffraff, but I was always very interested in women and girls. And so if you're going to compete on that playing field, again, I'm not 6'3", so throw that out the window. I don't have drugs and I don't really do drugs, so throw that out the window because unfortunately, hot girls oftentimes do like the guys with coke. and okay, so we throw that out the window. Yeah,
there's a life hack for you.
I can be funny, but I'm not the funniest guy in the world. So throw that out the window. So, and I'm again, handsome athlete, don't, all these things. So where can I compete? Yeah, I'm not the richest guy out there, but I was like, all right, at least I know that if I work hard for a certain period of time, I can accumulate enough, money to sustain myself and eventually find, a quality significant other. So I think, that was probably another point in my life where I was like, all right, this is what I got to do.
It sounds like when you kind of discovered sales, that was like the first big breakthrough.
That was enormous work.
So let's like zero in on that moment. What was like, there's always that struggle in the beginning before you like break through, right? So let's kind of zero in on that. What was that?
Yeah, to be totally honest with you on that, there really wasn't much struggle. I mean, I just was like, I'm putting my mind to this. I'm going to dress up. I'm going to look good. And I'm going to go out there. I'm going to, make my presentation and try to sell this stuff. I mean, dude, I was selling stuff like right off the bat. I mean, yeah, selling these, I'd sell a little paring knife for $20, and I'd make, eventually you get up to like 50% or 55% commission. And like, dude, for me to go make $10 or $10.50 or whatever, selling a little knife, I'm like, this is way better than going and working it out. So on that one, I didn't really have that like proverbial mountain, which I have gone through multiple times where you're just about to get to the top of it. You almost give up, but you don't. So on that one, I really didn't have it.
It was short, but if you look at like you were doing a warehouse job with a gangster.
Yeah.
Like some people's lives right now when they're like 30 years old still.
Yeah. So basically I started selling those knives and it was, cutlery, pots, pans, kitchen equipment, all that stuff. And it was a complete game changer. I mean, total and complete, because it just gave my overall level of confidence. I mean, it went up 1,000%. I thought that I was the man. And frankly, I was the man in that little group. I was. I mean, I think one year I was like the top salesman on the entire Western United States. And then they put me up on stage, and I mean it was awesome. And then along with that, girls were attracted to that. Girls that were part of this little group. I mean, you literally had groupies like back then. I mean, they're it's funny.
I remember rainbow vacuums. There was kind of same thing going on.
Yeah, so that was really, really, really good for me. And I was able to save up money. I always liked saving money, didn't like spending money. And then I was able to like start setting goals. I learned how to set goals for myself in that job. That's where I really learned how to set goals. And I remember one day, it's probably my favorite day. I think I made $1,000 before 12 in the afternoon. And I remember telling my boss, I'm like, if I do that, I'm taking the rest of the day off and canceling all my appointments. And that's what I did. And, I remember being at home and, kind of bragging to my dad about it. My dad was just like, he was very proud of me. But on the flip side of the coin, he's like, well, you got to keep working because you got expenses. And of course, I was living at home and didn't really realize that, but he was accurate. He was correct.
So you had your first $1,000 day when you were still in high school, it sounds like.
Yeah. And then I remember I would copy my checks and put them up on the wall, basically above my bed because I was proud of it.
So you talked about like setting goals. I think that's the key to it. Setting big goals, knowing you're going to have to go through that struggle, knowing there's going to be that period that you're going to have to break through. Then you hit that goal, right? Did you have a first kind of moment like that at Cutco or?
Yeah, I did. So my manager, I had two managers, Mike and JP, and yeah, they were awesome. And so they were the ones like teaching me how to like set goals. And then Mike, this is back in the tape cassette days. He's like, "Hey, Andrew, take these tapes and listen to them." And they were Anthony Robbins tapes.
There we go.
And Mike was older than me, real good guy. And I listened to these tapes and I would kind of drive around listening to them. And that was very helpful for me, real helpful for me. And then I had another wake up call like that probably 2 years later where I wound up getting some CDs that were Brian Tracy CDs. I don't know if you remember Brian Tracy.
Yep. Big sales.
And anyway, I used to listen to his goal setting tapes driving between Austin to Dallas. And I would just listen to those. That was huge, 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 huge for me. And that's when I really started like writing everything down, pen and paper, which I still do to this day.
Mm-hmm.
And, you see me, I mean, you never see me without that notebook. So
Well,
that was a big one for me as well.
Okay. So after you even forged even a better mindset by one, you hit like a bunch of successes and realize, oh, wow, this stuff really works. Started listening to Brian Tracy, Anthony Robbins. What was like the first big lofty goal that when you wrote it down, you were like, I think I could get this, but man, this seems fucking crazy. Like when you're writing it and then you hit it. Like what was the first goal like that?
The first real big one, which took me frankly forever to hit, was making $4,000 a month.
In income or passive?
Yeah, in income. And granted, look, I had a job, so I was making that from my job, but making $4,000 a month, basically off my own wits, off my own assets.
Okay.
Primarily real estate related. And that took forever.
So 4K like from investments or assets.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
The quote unquote passive income on top of your active income.
Which really there's no real passive income, but I mean it's fairly levered, and that's what I was looking for.
It's what the real estate gurus would call passive income. So from rentals and stuff like that.
Yeah. Interest income is, in my opinion, is about as passive as it gets. That's why I like to lend money. But anyways, that's neither here nor there. But that was my first big goal, was like $4,000 a month, written down, had it posted all over my walls and everything else.
How long did you think it was going to take you to get when you originally wrote it down?
Of course, I thought I was going to be able to get there immediately, but quickly. But I mean, no shit, that took me ages. That probably took me, no joke, probably like 4 years, I would say, to legitimately have that. I mean, no longer than that, actually. At least off the real estate, longer than that. When it really all changed was when I started setting up those assisted livings.
Beautiful. So let's zero in on that one a little bit, because that's awesome. That's the exact point that I want to talk about, because it seemed crazy to you when you first wrote it down, but you were like, maybe 6 to 12 months, right? And then you just continuously chipped away at that. Let's describe, talk about a point during that like adventure where you were like, man, fuck this. Like, I'm about to quit. This isn't worth it. I'm going to do something else.
Yeah. I mean, I had a lot of those along the way. Nothing as impactful as some of these other companies that I'd have, but like, yeah, owning the real estate along the way. I mean, dude, there's a lot of BS you got to deal with, right? I mean, a lot. And I mean, I could tell you 1,000 stories, but one of them that I
Let's hear
remember
one of the
pretty
worst
vividly,
ones that sticks out. Well, like one that just popped in your head.
being in a property, laying tile in it at 12 o'clock at night or 11 o'clock at night, and so you spent the whole day on your knees going over. She gets thrown off of the Section 8 program, blah blah blah, because she's violated her HAP contract, and I'm trying to like get her back on it, because I know if I don't get her back on it, I'm gonna have to go in there, fix it up, and that's gonna cost me a bunch of money. I go over there, and there's a pit bull running around in the front yard with a dirty diaper, and I'm going, oh my God, what am I getting into? The baby comes to the baby the baby comes to the door buck naked, and the mom is like, walking around with her with her bra, basically halfway down her chest. And I'm like, wow, this is what I'm dealing with. And again, I mean, maybe she was paying, or Section 8 was paying $1,000 a month, and basically I got an $800 mortgage PITI payment. You just can't let the thing go negative, because it's tough, right? I mean, this is back in the day when I really didn't have any money. So yeah, stories like that. I got 1,000 stories like that.
And they never stop, right?
And it never stops. And so that sort of stuff would just grate on you. It's not as stressful as a lot of this other stuff, because it just happens like slowly over time. But it's very, very, very irritating.
I think that brings it back to like the talent code and how like the myelin thing. And I'm not, you can think of it as a metaphor too, right? Like scars and like calluses and stuff like that. At this point, well, back then, that first time you dealt with that, it was probably like a little bit like soul crushing, right? Like you're like, holy shit, what am I doing? And now at this point, I bet you it's just like, just another day at the office.
It's all part of it. I had an eviction the other day. Lady, went through COVID with all the riffraff. So she's probably, I want to say she's like, give or take, rounded up about $10,000 behind. I mean, 10,000, that's a lot of money. Anyway, so I handled the eviction myself, and I lost on a technicality. So then I got to go refile on her. I mean, like, unless you got real deep pockets, how are you gonna deal with this stuff?
I think some of these stories you tell me, I think I get more infuriated about it than you do sometimes.
Yeah. Well, right now, right. But 20 years ago, trust me, 20 years ago was a different story. I would have been over there at 3 a.m. doing what I needed to do to get her out of the property.
A lot of the guys that will be listening to this are probably like at that point, like maybe early 20s, college. They're thinking of like their side hustles. I think that no matter what you do, you need to like just focus on it and like dedicate yourself to it, and not like, okay, this sucks, let me go try copywriting. I don't like that, let me go do sales, right? It's like whatever you like zero in on, you'll be successful at.
Yeah,
So,
I think that the universe will only reward you realistically after about 20 years.
well,
I mean, you might get lucky, and maybe you have somebody that can kind of fast track your road to success, but I think generally speaking, it takes about 20 years.
I think it depends on your success, or your definition of success,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
I would push back a little bit and say that first like 4K month, that's a
Yeah,
huge success in my opinion.
that was a monster win for me.
What did you feel like when you had that first 4K month?
Well, it wasn't necessarily about the first 4K month, but I do vividly recall driving around, without a job, thinking to myself, dude, I'm living off my own assets. I can support myself. So I'm a big believer that just being able to support yourself is a very, very, very noble goal. You're not living, at the wits of somebody else or your employer. You don't have to worry about getting fired. I mean, I always used to say I only want to report to God and the IRS. That's it.
Was it a relief? Did you feel like a weight off your shoulders, or just
Not really, because you know what, Brandon, I kept my overhead so low, which I do think is a huge secret. And a lot of people won't do that. My overhead was so damn low. I was never really worried because I mean, maybe it cost me, no joke, like $1,200 a month to live. So I could always go put together $1,200 and probably, and I was still out, partying and drinking and stuff on the weekends. So I was having a good time still. But yeah, so there was never like, oh my gosh, I'm so, glad that I was able to start making $4 grand a month because I wasn't strapped for cash. I was always living cheap.
did you get a rush from hitting the goal?
On that one, no, because I think it just happened, over such a long period of time. But again, I mean, I would say that I got a rush from eventually just like knowing, like, yeah, I was proud of myself. I'm like, I'm living life on my own terms.
Yeah.
Like, if I wanted to leave and go to South America, I could do that. I didn't have anybody telling me that I couldn't leave the office.
Yeah, I'm almost like addicted to that feeling. Like hitting
It's an
it.
amazing
Yeah.
feeling.
You remember the most recent one that we kind of shared, like the big number
Yeah.
that we had been talking
Yeah.
about for like
And
years.
how long did that take us? 2 years?
It took like 3 years.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I had like smaller ones. I know it was your original one, but that was one where when we first started, in my mind, I was like, I don't know if this thing's gonna get to that.
Yeah.
So I had like smaller ones, right? And we eventually worked up to it. But when did you first write that goal down?
That goal between you and yeah, I mean, I'm guessing 3-4 years ago.
I think you wrote it before we even met.
I probably did, to be totally honest with you, now that I'm thinking back on it. Because yeah, when I set everything up, and that was like December of 2013. Um, I probably so I set everything up in December of 2013, and then I think I started kind of like, vision bombing my head, so to speak, probably around 2014, and letting all the seeds get planted.
Beautiful. Yeah, for me, that one was like we had been talking about it so much that eventually it just became real. Then I
Yeah.
was just like pissed that we weren't there. Then eventually we just looked back and we're like, holy shit, like we just did that. And then you relish in it, and then it just becomes your reality, right? And now
It does. Yeah.
that was only a couple months ago, but now it's kind of now when we hit that, I'm like, man, that's cool, but we should be at double that. So for the people listening out there, I just kind of want to to me, I think that's the formula to success. Is like just setting small goals that you believe you can hit, work towards those, and eventually those goals are just become bigger and bigger. And I think that's the process. So you said you write them down every day. What's the big goal that you have written on the notebook now?
And I would share my goals with people because I remember reading that Babe Ruth used to point to left field and tell everybody that he was going to hit a home run.
Um,
And you put a little pressure on yourself. So I'll give you, I mean, I write down about 10 things. I'm really no longer focused on the financial stuff. I do have, I do have some financial goals. I write down our goal, which for our company, what we want the revenues to be. So I write that down every day. But frankly, like my main goals are family related. I want to
nice.
continue doing things the right way, staying in touch with God on a daily basis, making sure that I've got a great wife, I've got great kids, that they're healthy. So I've got my little list of what I write down, and then I do the same thing for myself. What I want to focus on, my health and spirituality and all that stuff. And I think it's good. It just keeps me on track. And then I've got, a goal for all the little businesses that I've got, real estate stuff. and so I write that down. That's really it, man. I mean, I do that every day. I think it's very good for me. It keeps me like a honing pigeon, focused.
Beautiful. So just to kind of reiterate that for the folks listening out there, his original big goal was 4K per month in passive income. He's probably 10x that at this point, right? We won't get into super details. Just our business goal, it's about, I just did the math. It's like 50x what it was when we first started, which is crazy.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
this is the constant process. So beautiful. I love those stories, Andy. I think it'll really give these folks, like, especially the young guys that are grinding. Like, I want to do it for people like that are in that position, like kind of where you were when you were laying tile, right?
This stuff doesn't happen immediately, right? I mean, I think a lot of people are like
These Zoom zombies are killing us.
20 that really appeared in my life. So just, I mean, you gotta put in the time, the energy, and the effort.
The Zoom zombies killed us just there. Can you reiterate what you just said? Because I think it was deep. Yeah. So we were talking about like the guys that are kind of at a similar point to where you were when you were like, laying the tile on that first property. You dropped something deep, and then the Zoom zombies attacked.
Yeah, I mean, look, this stuff takes a long time, and I mean, there's a lot of windy roads to get there, potholes, stop signs, car crashes, the whole 9 yards.
I was talking to my buddies recently in a group chat, and they showed a presentation like about business. We were talking about kind of the same thing, and this guy's drawing on a graph. He's doing a presentation, like a business presentation, and he just makes it like, the future proposition, how the business is going to look like, and he just makes a straight line up. And I said, yeah, it's like that, but just imagine that Michael J. Fox has the marker. It's a little bit of a cold joke, but makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, it's tough, man. I mean, most people are going to give up. Is the reality. And you do have to get lucky as well. I mean, look, I've gotten real lucky just living in Central Texas. We've gotten a huge influx of people from California over the years, New York, elsewhere. And so as a real estate person, I've been the beneficiary of that because you got supply demand. And there's a lot of inelasticity there because the supply doesn't really keep up with the demand. So that's been that's been very beneficial for me as well. So you got to get lucky. But you also have to place yourself in an area where luck is coming to.
Yeah, there's a lot of overnight successes that, took them like 10 years to get to that night.
Yeah, absolutely. And, even look at, like, for sake of argument, I mean, if you look at, COVID was really interesting. I mean, like, me personally, I think it was a scam. But look, they were able to do what they did. And
COVID was not a scam. Andy's trying to get me canceled from YouTube on my first video.
What I mean by this is that, look,
I'm messing with you.
people died and everything else, but I mean, without question, you can go look at the M2 graphs, and so this is really what I was referring to. I mean, they injected, I don't know what percent of the world's money supply that had all been created over the last couple hundred years. They boom, from, call it, mid 2020 to 2022. I mean, the entire world economy was flooded with money.
I think it was 60% or something insane like that.
It's a pretty crazy amount. So flooded the market. And so where did that money go? Right? I mean, it didn't want to stay in dollars because those dollars, they want to go into areas where it's going to hold value. So a lot of money went into, obviously, the stock market and other places, but a lot of the money went into real estate. So you saw real estate prices literally double in a lot of these areas in and call it a year and a half. It's crazy. Absolutely crazy.
So you got lucky
Um,
during COVID a little bit.
yeah. So then it's like, all right, well, you only really get lucky if you sell, but if you're smart, you can kind of refinance stuff, and if you know what you're doing, you could do stuff with that money. So look, I've had a lot of good fortune as well. A lot of good fortune.
Well, it's because you've been putting in like probably 10 to 14-hour days when you were getting this empire started out, right?
Yeah, longer than that. I think from like 3:30, 4:30 in the morning till 10 or 11 o'clock at night. And then eventually that backed off from like 3:30, 4 in the morning till probably 5 or 6 o'clock at night, maybe 7. And then that backed off until about 5 o'clock at night. And then eventually I started getting up a little bit later, call it 5 or whatever, and I'd work until 5. And then recently I started kind of sleeping in. So I don't get up until usually I did get up early today, but usually I don't get up until call it 6:30 or so, 6:30. And, like I'll work a full day today, but like, yeah, I mean, I can go take off and everything else if I want to.
All right, let's rewind a little bit. You said your day would start around 3:30 or 4 and end at 10 or 11 p.m.
Yeah.
So all the young guys listening out there, there's people like that out there that you're competing with. So marinate on that for a little bit. Andy, awesome.
And I will say, I wish I could tell you that it was, yeah.
Go ahead.
I wish I could tell you that it was all natural energy, but there's plenty of coffee, the lubricant of production in those early mornings.
How many coffees per day would you drink?
Yeah, two or three, I would say.
That ain't bad.
Yeah, but still, I mean, again, getting up at that hour. But what happens is once you get going, I mean, your body just becomes addicted to it, and then your mind, if you wake up from a dream or whatever, the first thing you know, you're stressing about payroll or whatever it is. So then you're up and going.
All right, love it, man. Awesome stories. To wrap it up, I just have a list of like 3 interesting random questions that I'm gonna ask everybody, kind of like some fire rounds. You could go off if anything inspires you. Biggest life-changing book or interview or content or something like that.
Yeah, that's a good question. Life-changing book. I mean, I was a pretty big fan. I've read it twice, Predator's Ball. So I think that's a pretty good book just because it gives you an overview of pretty much like how the LBO game worked in the 1980s. And frankly, all those guys they're the guys that run everything. So it's a good book to study.
Okay, so kind of learning how the top dogs think and a glimpse into their life. I did read that one. Recommended by you. Funny enough. What's been your most important lesson in business if you had to pick one?
Yeah, cash flow, man. You gotta focus on cash flow. Don't focus on equity. Don't focus on net worth. You can't go to dinner on your equity. So focus on, I think, recurring revenues, money coming in every month, legit free cash flow that you can spend.
That's a big one that we talk about. The millionaires in net worth that are still working their jobs for cash flow, right? Your biggest loss ever, what did you learn from it?
I mean, from a business standpoint, I would say just making a bad partnership decision. I know that there's guys out there that they're doing partnerships with everybody, anybody and everybody. I mean, it's just like getting married. You got to be really, really, really careful who you get married to. You got to be really careful, who you get in bed with. Because, I mean, these things can, man, I mean, if you're going to invest that much time, energy, effort, money, everything else, you gotta know what you're doing. So I've had a number of operating businesses over the years. I was like, all right, I'll finance it. You run it. I came up with the idea and then, bought all the equipment and everything else. And I had the contracts, but I mean, the next thing you know, I was pretty much doing all the work, all the marketing work, all the sales work, some of the operational work, which I really didn't want to do. And then the next thing I know, family members of this individual got brought into the company.
All right, we're gonna wrap it up there. Andy got attacked by the zombies, but dropped a ton of bombs for you, ton of lessons in there. Thank you guys for joining me. Stay tuned for more. Peace.